Psychotechnologies live. Welcome to a not at all special episode of Psychotechnologies live. We have with us Serene Desiree. You may remember her from the episode of Does Religious Faith Give You an Edge? She's got a YouTube channel where she talks about interesting things to interesting people. Go check her out after the episode. So let me just start and set the setting for everyone. I recently was spending some time with my Jewish community of what we call ourselves OTD, which is off the derech, or it's essentially like the people that used to be in Orthodox Judaism and now are no longer in there.
Can you just translate derech? What's off the, I know those words, but
derech is path. Right. So there's this path set out in these books. The things together are called halacha, which is to walk, something like that. It's one of the
rules, right? It's all the Jewish rules.
Yeah, so it's all the Jewish rules, and it technically comes from the word halacha is to walk, and I may not have conjugated it correctly, but that's the main word. And so there's this path that you're meant to, they tell you that you have to do, or bad things happen. And the people that don't do that are called OTD, off the derech. So I'm, in normal parlance, I would just call myself ex-Orthodox, which is kind of the English way of saying it. But recently, so I have this community of Jews that would do that, and we're talking about it, and I'm still feeling the Jewishness and kind of into it, but also not into the rules. So I'm in this weird liminal space where I'm not really sure what makes sense to me or what is true or what's going on. Religious journey, faith journey, whatever you want to call it. And so I grew up very much in the center of it, and Serene is converting to Judaism. So she is a non-Jew, and something about Judaism has drawn her towards it and made her want to join it and be part of that. And so the theory that I'm working off of what Judaism is, and this is just sort of the place where I'm at now. I'm not necessarily saying that this is what I'm going to think in a month, but it's Judaism is a narrative. So I used to think Judaism was a set of rules that you had to follow or bad things would happen. And then I hit a point where I'm no, that's not true. And then I went through my atheist phase, and then I came into my spiritual phase, and I'm oh, it's a way of relating to God. And I'm realizing that's not that is part of it, but that's not exactly what the main thing is. Because if you're here for the truth in relation to God, I think Buddhism does it a lot better. But there is something that Judaism has.
That's a fighting phrase.
Yeah, but
at least say that Buddhism does it in a very different way, and that gives them space to both exist.
Well, this is my story and my view.
All right. Your story.
I'm in my perspective there. I'm not saying this is objectively true and whatever. Obviously everyone has different journeys, but for me, the Buddhism kind of sits down, or at least the way we've been practicing it, which I think is not necessarily traditional Buddhism, but more of let the meditation guide you Buddhism. It's much easier to just let go and connect to the spirit world and connect to God and that. But there is something that Judaism has that Buddhism doesn't have, and it's been very sticking out for me for a while, and I'm not exactly sure what it is, and I think it might be the narrative. And the Judaism is the story where we come from a place, we do a thing. We've had a history, there's a way of relating, and it's not just a narrative, but a collective narrative. So everyone agrees this is the story, and the expression 2 Jews, 3 opinions. So they all disagree on
I heard it was 2 Jews, 5 opinions.
Yeah. The Jews on an island, and he's got all these buildings, and one building is where he prays and one building is where he doesn't pray. Because it's part of being Jewish is other people are wrong also, and And like that's true, and like that's a narrative, and like this is a thing that I think Jews would agree with, and also they would like, you know, be like, no, that's not true, but they also kind of like it's kind of part of the narrative, and I think that's a lot of what I've been missing. In the secular world, they don't really necessarily have, some of the narratives are good, some of them are not, but yeah, that's kind of where I'm at. I think like the rest of the stuff is all around it, but the Judaism, the thing in the religion, like the thing in the middle is a narrative. It's not a set of rules. It's not a exactly like your own personal relationship with God. It's the story of the Jews left Egypt and we've been persecuted, and you know, all the things that it's part of. It's a collective narrative.
What comes to my mind
That's
is like, I read Eckhart Tolle's book, The Power of Now, and it was like a psychoactive book for me, right? And it changed the way I was perceiving the world. Like it was, and I have had those experiences from Judaism, but they seem to be because I am trying to find them and kind of going on my own journey, rather than like I read the Tanakh and I suddenly have this like crazy psychoactive experience, right?
right. Or even like going to a rabbi's house or doing the rituals, and like, yeah, like the psychoactive experience is not like, that's not, you know, that can happen sometimes, but that's not what it's focused on. That's not what it's meant to be, and they often discourage it as well.
That's not the, I want to be like, the version of Judaism that I was brought up in was not the psychoactive one. It sounds like for you as well.
I don't know that there is like a long-term, like I think some of the reform and stuff might do that a little bit, but I don't think there's been like this has been a thing that we've been doing for a long time, where we go somewhere and have these crazy experiences. Versus I think Buddhism is that. I think crazy experiences are very much a part of Buddhism. Versus like in the Judaism, like we like the modern traditions are saying like there's no, like prophecy ended at the end of Tanakh, which is like destruction of the second temple, which is 2000 odd years ago.
I have a different angle here, because I see the mystical branch of like mystical Christianity. There is a mystical branch of Christianity. There's like Thomas Aquinas, St. John of the Cross. There is like more recently like Bernadette Roberts, who passed away a couple of years ago. She wrote a book titled On Having No Self, and it reads like gibberish, like the same way you would expect it to read if someone was completely nuts and was trying to describe the experience of being completely nuts. But I see that there's a Buddhist branch of mysticism, and then I see also like the shamanism branch that's taken out of tribal cultures. There's a mystical branch over there, like there is a Jewish branch of mysticism. It's just mysticism in every time I've ever seen it has been hard to find, except for like who was the magician guy who wanted to popularize himself, and so he was quite well known. But generally mysticism is quite hidden and esoteric because that's where it fits in its role in society. But I see a Jewish mysticism branch, it's just not so common. And yes, I've never seen it practiced in a living way. Or maybe I have one friend who I think practices in a living way, but I see it as quite uncommon.
I mean, I think that's almost definitionally true, where like the mysticism deals with the esoteric, which is the things that are not in the common parlance or what's commonly being used.
That's the nature of mysterious things. They're going to locate themselves in like the back corner of the conversation. They're not going to be center stage. Otherwise that wouldn't be the mysticism anymore. It would be the center stage, and then something else would be mysterious.
Yeah, like
if you're looking at like Kabbalah, though, I mean, you could say that Kabbalah is a mystical practice, but it was reserved for, I mean, as far as I know, which I don't know a lot about it, it was reserved for like the top student. He would be taken kind of away by the rabbi and shown this extra stuff, this Kabbalic text.
Right. I like see an analogy between Kabbalah and Vajrayana as the like this practice of being deeply in touch with the true shape of reality through obscure texts or through very specific writings or through very specific practices. Like I see them as like analogs of each other, but I don't know how many other people see that. But yes, like Kabbalah has the classic thing of being reserved for only people who are over 40 through some cultures, but you can learn it early. I looked at Kabbalah when I was, a teenager, and I went, what the heck is this? This is irrelevant and pointless. And I look at it now and I'm like, oh no, that's because they were describing a thing that didn't matter to me and didn't make sense to me back then. But now it's like, it lands. And you will get the occasional mystical teenager who is way ahead of their biological age and make sense of it. But I think it's more likely that people will do as I did as a teenager, look at Kabbalah and be like, huh, what the heck is, but later in life, as a like closer to the maturity of a 40-year-old, will look at it and go, oh, they're really pointing to something. It's a practice that becomes relevant like further down a lifetime.
Right. And this is a thing that is part of Judaism.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
But
And
it wasn't like, here I am as a 31-year-old being like, well, the Judaism of my childhood, that the big gray man in the sky, big gray beard, is not the Judaism that I can practice today, because I just can't find myself believing in a man in the sky.
Right. It's just like, it's not true.
Right.
Well, okay, wait, but can you believe in the universe and that the universe brings you, like, can you?
Right, and that's a different thing.
Right. So that's sorry?
I'm asking you though, can you believe that you can manifest things from the universe, for instance?
Yeah, for sure. So that is
So why does God have to be a big man in the sky with a
Well,
great
he doesn't
beard?
need to be.
Why-
But that's
no, that's what we're saying. We're saying he's not that. He's not that, even though that's like the story. And I get why they tell children that, but this is something that the adults believe. Right? Like, it's one thing if I'm like 5 and I think that, or 10 maybe, but there's the adults still think this.
No, but wait. So they think, I've never heard God referred to explicitly as a big man in the sky with a beard.
Well, he's not a man because it's that, there's a lot of things, like it's not actually a man.
Yeah.
That's more Christianity.
So for a spiritual way into Judaism, can't you just substitute God as a man in the sky with the universe? I mean, isn't that he is also the universe?
So that's what I do, and I find Judaism makes a lot more sense. And to be a little more specific, there is like the two of them that come to mind. There's two names for God. There's a lot of names for God, but the two of them that are coming to mind are Enod Milvado, or which is there is nothing except for. So that would be like what you're calling the universe. And Hamakom is the place. So that's like where we are. And I think, and then there's also Ein Sof, which is like a little more of a Kabbalistic terms, as without end. But that's, I guess, like more the infinite. But there's like a lot of ways of referring to God, or a lot of aspects, or however you want to break that down. And I think that's like more the modern interpretation. Like that's as an adult, that's how I'm seeing it. But that's not how Orthodox people see it. Like I've had this discussion all the time with Orthodox people, and then I'll like start to talk about, I'm like, oh, so like the universe is like this and it's like that. And like when they say God, like when I start like darshaning, when I start like explaining, like, oh, this is what these things mean, right? They're not like saying you're wrong. They're saying you're not allowed to do this.
Can you lay out a little bit of the Orthodox perspective? Sounds like you talked to a couple of people.
Right. So the Orthodox perspective tends to be, and like I say this as like at least the branch that I'm from, or the branches I have access to, there's a huge amount of space, but like it's very taboo to start like prophesizing, or like to start just like explaining, be like, hey, like this is what I'm feeling it is. And like this is like kind of what we do on the channel all the time. We're like, I think things are like this. Like
right.
This
We
is
grab
how
a psychotech, we're like, what happens if I say it like this?
Yeah.
If I feel like this, yeah.
and it's like, again, I don't know that there's like necessarily a halacha against this. Like, I don't think there's necessarily a specific law against this that I could find or know of, but everybody's like, they're always pulling these things and like trying to make, like, the culture is very designed to not have you do that unless you're, maybe like certain rabbis could do that. But
I have a general sense that sort of when Christianity came in as a structural religion, it was embedded in the context of maybe like the individual practitioners, like the man in the forest that you go to, who was the witch doctor and the healer, and the like, he could access spirit, or she could access spirit. And then there was a desire to democratize so that everyone could have access to spirit. We just do these practices and then we have access to our own spiritual connection. And at the same time, they monopolized. And so they like went on witch hunts and murdered all of the other people who had different pathways to access spirit, and they shut down other systems in the hope of unifying society by having one true system that could access spirit.
right. And some
did some damage in the process.
Yeah, and some of that kind of stuff was also going on in Judaism. So like when like back in the day, it was just like people prophesized if they prophesized, and that's just how things were. And so you have an example of Moshe or Moses when they're in the desert. There's these two people in the camps called Eldad and Medad. I don't know how to translate that to English. And and they just started prophesizing in the camps. And then Yehoshua, who became Moshe's successor, shows up to Moshe, and he's like, hey, these guys are prophesizing, like, let's go shut that down. And he's like, I wish, like, you're doing this for my sake, like, don't do that. I wish all the Jews would prophesize, right? Because like, I wish we were a nation of prophets. Like, that's what I want. And or not even that's what I want, because he's like Moses, he's too humble for that, but it's like that's what's good or something. And then we have like throughout our history, so after Deuteronomy, they go to Israel, and then you have the book of prophets. Like, that's the second. The Tanakh is divided into 3 sections, and the middle section is called Nevi'im, or prophets. And it's all about the prophets that happen, right? And it's all these like not random, but like, I guess, but like just people prophesizing and saying things and getting prophecies from God and doing that stuff. And like, that's how they lived for a while. And so like, this is in our culture, but it's like, it's in our cultural history, I would say, but it's not really in the modern day culture.
Right.
And it's like very taboo in the modern day culture.
Wasn't there a switch that happened somewhere where prophesizing was no longer allowed?
Yeah, so the last prophets were Daniel, and then Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah. So those were in the book of Daniel. They talk about that. And so those were Daniel's older, so like those 3 would have been the last 3 prophets. They're the ones with Nebuchadnezzar in the fiery furnace, and they survived. Which also, I just read that story recently, and it seems like very sus. Like, I don't like. I guess another thing is like, well, they have these stories that are like people being in furnaces and not getting burnt, and like that's,
well, from a practical, modern, scientific perspective, that's a little bit unlikely.
Yeah.
Right. We have to ask, as reasonable scientists, how the heck did they do that? Not that
Right.
the only way to see the world, but like we live in also the world of atoms, where things can't burn and not burn at the same time unless you're doing something that we don't know about in terms of physics.
Right. So that's what they claim, right? So that's like the Orthodox interpretation is they are doing something that's not known to physics, and that's God. And God doesn't follow the laws of physics. And so but he does all these things. And then therefore you wind up getting this like man in the sky kind of thing, but he's not a man, and doesn't have a body, all that stuff, right? Like, And so versus if you just take it the universe and you say, well, this is how the universe works, and then they say, well, I guess like the universe has like a specific consciousness that it makes choices sometimes that violate those laws. But then to me it's like, I don't know, like you need some evidence. Like that's the reason I can't get into it, is because you're just making stuff up.
It's interesting. I have this sense that like this stupendous story of like miraculous happenings, it kind of takes the biblical context and it puts it almost in a fantasy world. Like
Yeah.
Like I have the Harry Potter story. I'm like, okay, that's not the real world story. That's like we step to the side and then we live in the Harry Potter world over there while we read the books. But if you do that to the religious text, it's forever in this other bucket. It's forever in this like, well, it's not really about this world. It's about the religious world, which like you feels like a diminishment of the religious story to have these versions of events that seem too far-fetched. At the same time, like there needs to be space for possibility and visionary and like imagination, but if it's too out of reality, it's like, well, no, that's the reality that the religion describes, and we're living in this reality. That
right. And there is like the Orthodoxy does do that, where they're like, oh, it's all true, but that's how they deal with it. Like it's not like that anymore, and anybody that says that is blasphemy, right?
Right. Which is tragic because it feels like it's making itself out of touch or something.
Yeah, like you've built a religion around a book that you've then says doesn't apply to your life anymore. So it's like an internal it's like a paradox in a way that is not really that helpful. Like it doesn't get you closer to God, right? If we're saying the universe, the God, like the thing that we're talking about, like does the religion get you closer or further? It gets you further. And so the thing for me that I'm tripping on a little bit is like I am like kind of I do sometimes like read some of the stuff. I just read Isaiah for a whole bunch of reasons, because it's like axial age stuff, and like that's sort of adjacent to what we're doing. And like whenever I read these things and like read about the prophecies, I'm like, oh, I get what they're talking about. Like that happens to me sometimes. And I want to, like sometimes I feel prophecies coming on. And like that is something that is like really important. Like that's something that's part of our culture that's like amazing, and we can have that. And I get these like visions of me being the guy that's like coming back and being like, you guys aren't worshiping God. Like you've lost it. Like I'm gonna come back and show it to you. But also that's like a lot.
Like I have a sense of there are like many of the Bible stories, like siblings fighting, like the Jonah story where he's told to go to a town and tell them all to repent.
Yo, I relate to that.
Like deeply human scenarios where they're describing a deeply human story. We recently saw the Joseph story. We saw the stage production of Joseph's story, and as it was happening, the Joseph story, Joseph has a beautiful coat. His brothers described as kind of envious of him, and they throw him in a hole and sell him off as a slave, right? But other details, and that's one perspective of the story.
Right.
The brothers are a little bit like nasty, and they do this thing. Here's another perspective. Joseph told his brothers about his dreams, about his like sort of prophecy, but he also like he talked himself up, right? His dream is that he was in the field and he had 11 brothers, 11 stalks of wheat that all bowed down to his great and mighty stalk of wheat. And you can imagine like his brothers talking to him and being all like, well, that's some dumb hot shit story you're telling us. You have some shitty dreams.
Right.
And like,
right, it's like uppity
like,
guy.
Maybe the brothers weren't the evil ones in this scenario. Joseph had a really big ego when he told his dreams, and he like told his brothers, I shall stand up and you shall all bow down to me. And Joseph was actually a jerk, and he was in need of some humbling in the world. And turns out that if you speak up yourself like that, then yeah, your 11 brothers will humble you greatly. And then of course he goes on to the rest of the journey, and he ends up.
And it turns out he was right. Like, so that was a real
Right.
prophecy. And
Right.
to me, that's huge. Like, because like there's that conflict
But
of
like, here's a different message.
everyone's.
Here's a different message. You can have a right prophecy, but be careful who you tell.
Right. Careful who you
Like,
tell, how you tell. Yeah.
But that's not the angle of the story that's traditionally taken. You know, traditionally the brothers are seen as quite nasty when they throw him in the hole, and
Well, it is nasty.
so you know their actions delivered the story, right? Their actions delivered him ending up in Egypt and ending up like.
But nasty people aren't not a part of the world. Like you also
Right.
have to account for nasty people.
But he was nasty, right? The main
Yeah.
character was actually nasty to his brothers. He's like, I'm the best. I have the cool coat. You know, screw you guys.
Yeah.
I'm the favorite. And you know, he felt what was coming to him or something.
Yeah. And like I think there's like I think that like that story, as in like it's not clear cut good guys versus bad guys, right? Like it's very ambiguous, and it's very like a lot of hard stuff going on, you know, because Joseph probably was this like super on point successful guy, and that's how he rose up through the ranks.
Right.
And you know, he saw what was going to happen, and you know, he spoke of that, and
Right.
you know, his father saw that, and you know, gave him his coat prize or whatever. And the brothers are still dealing with this, like, hey, we're this tribe of people, and you're like trying to take us out, like, you know, maybe they were a little less hierarchical or whatever. I don't know, like, I don't know what exactly is going on with them, but there's like that conflict is a real conflict.
I mean, I see these stories as like deeply human, like a sometimes painful rendition of what it's like to be a human, and hopefully relatable forevermore. Like they were written down because they were relatable, because they had deep wisdom in them. I hope that they continue to have, like I'm almost treating them like Zen koans, that you can keep turning them over and seeing a different angle of the story, and keep turning them over and see the deeply human relationships that are going on in the story.
Right. And I think, like, to build on what you're saying, I think when you have, like, if you have a culture where these stories are in the middle, and then the way you can, and then we have like different interpretations on the story, you get to know people very quickly, in a very deep way, because the stories are floating around, and you can tell based on, you know, how much detail are they, like how nuanced is their belief, is how nuanced is their interpretation, is like how learned they are they just on one side, or they're like, no, like Joseph was right, the other guys are wrong. And you're like, okay, like you see yourself as this person, and this is what you're going to do in that situation. And, you know, I can like sort of like prepare myself, or decide not to get into business with you or whatever. You know, it just gives a lot of like cultural context. And so that's why I'm going this like narrative route. Like, I think that's kind of what it is.
I'm
But I'm
interested
not
in hearing
convinced.
more about the narrative route. Like, why are narratives so significant to you right now?
Because I'm bad at them, and I don't have any good ones.
Oh, okay.
I don't like them. But it's like affecting me in a real way. So a lot of the stuff we're doing, like we're part of the merge, and in general we're the meta modern. And recently the merge, some of the wokeness has been showing up a little bit, like decolonization. And also I was hanging out with this other guy, and he's like talking like axial age revolution perspective. And now, I don't fit into any of that because I'm not a colonist. I'm a Jew, and we're sojourners. Like, we just show up wherever, like, wherever we think people aren't going to murder us. Like, that's where we'll go. Right? Like,
I was thinking about this, and I was thinking like the history of Judaism, like strangers in a strange land is a line from, I think it's from Joseph as well, but or Egypt. The Exodus.
It's Egypt. It's at the Passover. We do that every year,
Right.
which is coming.
Which is this sense that, you know, there's this really interesting and powerful conversation about connection to land, and having a land, and being a like native culture to a land, and honoring the land that you live on. And then I look at the origin story of, like, probably most modern people have moved cities and countries many times over the last 5 generations, but the Jews especially got kicked out of multiple countries, and they just don't have a land in like we have the land of Israel, but much of the Jewish population lives in a diaspora way, lives in all different lands all over the world.
Yeah, I think it's now it's like 50-50. But like exactly what you're saying, the modern day Judaism, and I say modern day as in the last 2,000 years, is a diasporic religion. So like
the destruction of the temples, which was I think 1,500 years ago, destruction of temples. When was yeah, because Hanukkah isn't actually written down. Hanukkah is later.
Yeah, I think it's, and those are, yeah. I think it's like 70 AD. I don't know, we can just Google it if you wanted, but
Hanukkah 164.
no, it's second, Google set destruction of Second Temple. But I want to continue with the energy that we're with the flow. It like Judaism was in a way, and we did like a lot of the sacrifices. We used to do sacrifices. So like even that has a whole history of everybody could do like back, like Abraham used to just do a sacrifice wherever he wanted. And then eventually it started to, by the time you get to the first temple, it's a central location. So it's you do the sacrifices in Jerusalem at the temple with the priests. And they say that's it. And then you can get like killed for doing it elsewhere.
That was a centralization.
Yeah. It's that like democratizing and then re-centralization that keeps happening. And I think like this is one of the themes that we struggle with as the meta-modernists, of we want the decentralization and also the coordination which you get from a centralization.
Well, I think I'm interested in the possibility of like a strong group is made out of strong individuals. So we want centralization, and then we want strong individuals, but then we still want them to coexist together in the same room, right? We don't want everyone to stay weak. We don't want everyone to come into the room and keep their yaps shut so they don't offend anyone. That makes a really weak group. We actually want strong characters, and we want the invitation to like bring themselves forward and then work out how to coexist.
Right. Right. And I think like all like anything that's going to like last multiple generations, so like all religions are that's one of the things that they're struggling with, like, or that's one of the things that they're trying to build into the structure is how do you have the people do their individual worship and do it well and live good lives, while also, I don't want to say being subservient, because not everyone does it this way.
Respecting the collective.
Yeah, but like coordinating with the collective.
Maybe participating in the collective as well.
Yeah. So Judaism has like we have minyans essentially, which are like the big. Anytime you're praying, you're supposed to pray with 10 men.
Or there's certain like a prayer congregation is a group of 10 men. You can pray individually, but anything short of 10 men, you're doing the individual prayers, basically.
Yeah, it's a different set of prayers. Like you don't get to do everything. And because there's the collective, like the Shechinah, the divine presence rests on the collective.
What does that, can you say more about what that means? I'm less familiar with that.
I wish I wish I could.
It's connected to your shared narrative idea, right? Because it got a strong, Judaism is a really strong shared narrative. So if you're currently experiencing a lack of that, it's not something you can easily get back.
You mean like me personally?
Yeah.
Well, it's not true exactly, because I never disrespected Judaism, so I don't feel
you were not rejected for being a rebel.
Like no, like I'm off and I'm like saying, okay, like that's not true, but I'm not saying like, oh, like let's get rid of the Jews now, right? Like I'm right, I'm just like, no, this is not true, I'm not doing it. You shouldn't do it, which is it's different. So it's like individual, but I never sold out my people, and I don't say bad things about Jews except to other Jews. which is part of it.
It's just like this is like reserved words for certain within, there was a ginger, right? Only a ginger can call another ginger a ginger.
Right. It's in group. Yeah, it's in group stuff, right? Like where you can, because you're like, yeah, like if you're cursing them, you're cursing yourself. So it's like I'm not cursing them, I'm saying we are cursed. But that's part, that's part of the culture.
I feel like every
so
culture has those things, the inward pointing pain that they share.
Yeah, that they don't always express well. It's like nobody beats up my brother except for me. Which doesn't work for children. Like you can't just beat up your children because
nobody beats up my children except for me.
Yeah. Yeah, like I think the olden days they probably did that, but nowadays we don't do that.
No.
Yeah, because there's like an inherent love, and they're like, even the narrative, like there's still the same narrative. Like even though I reject everything, it's it doesn't matter because I'm still that culture. Like I can't escape it, right? Like if I see some people try to escape and like they'll go down the woke path, but it, like I have this Jewish friend that does that, but like it doesn't really work because she's like, oh, we're colonized. I'm like, no, we're not. No, we're Jew. We fled her from the war. Like our intergenerational trauma, for like the Ashkenazi at least, is like the Holocaust is the most recent one. And so, my cousins might have this is stuff we talk about with, and Elliot has talked about it, and like all this stuff is relatable because that's our intergenerational trauma. It's not, that's what's affected our culture. It's not like being decolonized, or it's not being colonized.
So I have some stuff to say about the woke stuff, but I don't know how. It's not super on topic.
How does it feel?
Your experience of it? Personal.
Well, yeah. So like I was wondering why at some point it's easier for me to. I'm not triggered by super right-wing people, even though I don't agree with them, but I'm triggered by super left-wing people, even if I agree with them on some things, right? And like, I guess personality-wise, it's like I've just been wondering for a long time, like, why do I not hate the right? Like, even terrible people, even like, fascists, like they're awful people. I don't agree with them. They just don't make me angry. It's just like, they're just there, right? And I realized that. So you're familiar with the drama triangle? It's like this. It's a triangle of a perpetrator, victim, and savior, right? And it's a toxic triangle. Every part of that is toxic, right? And some people kind of identify, and this is for interpersonal relationships. It exists all the time. So like, I know.
So it's for the audience. It's persecutor, victim, rescuer.
Yeah,
and these names change sometimes. Sometimes it's like hero, victim tends to stay, but rescuer, savior, persecutor.
So if you watch a Shakespeare play or any sort of play or movie, there's always going to be this triangle of interactions in almost every scene. And some people you might notice really inhabit one of them a lot in their lives. And a healthy person will kind of distance themselves for any of them, for all of them. So instead of a victim, you empower yourself, right? Instead of a person, right, you become like a challenger, like I know you can do better, sort of thing. Maybe there's a healthier way to do that. And a rescuer might provide resources, but they won't like become codependent and I
have to save you from your own bullshit.
Yeah, exactly. And so we did this exercise in Jesse McKay's retreat, which really opened my eyes. He said, all right, go to the one that you identify with most. And so I kind of went to persecutor, I guess, because I'm comfortable with like
less than the others. The kind of
I like the ribbing, and like I think when I'm in fight, flight, or fear, I just generally go to fight more. But like I'm not a bully. Like I'm not,
punching. I totally believe you. Yeah.
better.
You what?
No, Elliot doesn't feel like he's got like like that fearful responses all the time.
All right. Well, like, let's play this game. Like, which one do you think I land in? Between.
Oh, it's so obvious.
I'm asking Dan.
It's probably rescuer.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. But I think you're getting much better at that.
Balanced.
Yeah.
Much more balanced than I
Yeah.
ever was, for sure.
So we did this. Then Jesse, what are you, Daniel?
I think I think like rescuer is like my pathology, but the other one,
The victim.
no, I'm very not victim. It took me a while to like figure out like that part, to be like, oh, like actually these things hurt, and it like it bothers me, and also like it makes it difficult for me to do things, so I need to like sort of accept that I'm vulnerable. But the persecutor is like my natural tendency, where it's because I do want to challenge people.
Yeah. So
All the
yeah,
time.
there's like there's also like different amounts, right? So you could, but even in my own head, like I'll get angry at myself, right? There's a persecutor in my head as well. And that's kind of the narrative. And so then he says, now do the one that you identify with least. And so now you walk into that corner. And I walked into the victim, and then we did this like dance where you had to act out your role. And
in the room with some music playing, like, all right,
12 other people.
We play the chicken dance, and everyone starts playing a little bit like their role. Like a couple people start like pointing at other people, being like, ah, and then like obviously the victims are like, ah.
Thinking about being a victim triggers me.
Yeah. I
The exercise.
like playing this exercise was very uncomfortable for me. Like I did it, right? But it was like, oh, I hate being the victim. Like this is fucking awful. I never want to do this, right? And there were some people who were, especially in the perpetrators, some people had a really hard time with it. Like there was this girl who kind of had this like like she was like a kitten, she couldn't like fully embody it. And then there was a guy who just kind of didn't even want to identify with it. Like he didn't even want to do it, right? And like they don't want to act out like a play. Like this is so untouchable for some people, this role.
Yeah.
We can't even pretend.
Pretend. You can't even do it. Like
yeah, no, for sure. Because I know what that's like, and I'm not going there. No, but yeah, I'm much more open to that now. But I feel that hard.
For sure. So for me, go on. Yeah.
It's these patterns, like just to like defend these people, even though I don't know them, because I relate to them too hard. There's like these patterns in life like that you can fall into, and like the victim one is one that like it's like I see it as weakness, like in this way, not that victims are weak necessarily. And that was like a groove that I saw people go down, and I saw that I could go down it, and I was like, no. Like whatever happens, I'm not doing this.
Yeah.
And so there's no like, it's not rational anymore. It's just no, I'm never doing that.
Right. See, I always book
now you're asking me to do it, like no. But now I'm like trying to be more open and stuff. So it's
in my head, any place that I can never go to is like controlling me, right? Because let's say I'm in the real world and the government has some sort of system of oppression going. Maybe they've got COVID lockdowns or something, and I'm not allowed to be a victim. Like, well, wait a second, but I actually am a victim of some COVID lockdowns. I am having to live under a structure that I don't necessarily like, but I'm not allowed to realize my own victimhood. And so I'm just going to flip into some strange other belief, or I'm going to get very angry at the government rather than like, no, I have to just like, everyone's got to play small for a while the COVID goes away. Like, no, but this like, if I can't do that, then it's going to control me. It's going to force me into some other weird and wacky behavior that goes weird.
Yeah. I'm still, I guess, attached to like that as like an important transitionary step for a lot of people along the way.
Oh yeah.
And like for my journey as well, where it's like I am going to be acting irrational because of it, and I'm gonna like maybe make up stories or do things just so that I don't get caught in there. And as but it is also acknowledging that is an unenlightened perspective.
So
that might be a good one.
I want to go.
Better than the alternative.
Oh yeah, sorry. I want to go a little bit further because, like, I think I noticed some other things in this kind of drama triangle loop where, like, in the beginning of before the dance started, I was kind of joking to my friends, and I was like, I was in the victim triangle, and I was like, oh, I was the victim, and I was like, I'm really triggered by that word, so I was like making this joke. But
Nice.
But then my friend said, that's not actually being a victim, that's being a perpetrator disguised as a victim, right? So you're pretending to be a victim,
Yes.
you're using this perpetrator thing to
to change everyone else's narrative.
Yeah, but I think what happens there is there's a perpetrator that can't come out as a perpetrator because it's shadowed, and so then the victim has to act like a victim in order to be a perpetrator. And I think same with, like, you have on the other side of the spectrum, you have like the right, and you have the West Virginia coal miners who don't have jobs, right? And suddenly they're kind of lost in the sea of victimhood, but instead of feeling like victims, they will go and commit hate crimes or whatever it is, or like just get angry at the government or whatever happens. So like there's this kind of,
I say this as if you,
it's like sublimated emotions.
grab for the ambulance chaser lawyers, right? And we're like the subset of societies that are the lawyers who chase after the ambulance and try and get business by convincing a victim to sue their perpetrator in the court of law, right? And the message that the ambulance chaser lawyers use is, you've been wronged. What they did to you is not okay. Have you been mistreated at work? Like, it's someone else's fault that you're the victim, right? And that's like, sometimes you got to tell people, hey, you're actually a victim in this situation. And then those West Virginia coal miners go like, it's someone else's fault that everything sucks. I'm going to get mad. I'm going to get real mad. And that's the journey we're on.
I don't actually know the story you guys are referring to.
so
I can't comment on it,
but I think I kind of discovered something with myself where I realized that it was so much easier to identify with the right, because overarchingly, not all the time in every situation, but the right of politics likes to say
empower.
Well, I would say perpetrate. I mean, it depends, right? It depends what level you're on, because I'm talking about the more toxic version, right? The healthy version is doing a lot of things that are great, and also on the left doing a lot of things that are great, right? But on the unhealthy version, the right is a perpetrator. So they're like, look at these stupid woke people. They say all this nonsense, and it's kind of this narrative that I see a lot is like the right calling the woke idiots, and then the woke are calling the right perpetrators. So they're saying you're awful,
the bad guys.
You're the bad guys, right? You're awful people, and the woke's like, and the perpetrator, and the right is like, you guys are idiots. You don't know what's going on.
Mm-hmm. And so, like, you're gonna, like, that's where you fall into.
Yeah, and you said your friend was talking about how she was talking about the colonizer thing, right? And so if you play really hard into this kind of toxic drama triangle, and you're just a regular straight white person, you have the option of either, I'm going to say something really
like
fucking,
white guilt.
I'm going to say something really,
just don't get us kicked off YouTube. That's all I asked.
Don't get us kicked on you. You can say stuff.
Okay, well, that's
You
fine.
can also
So,
like pick toy versions.
Whatever. We haven't had any strikes yet, so.
all right. So you have the option of being a perpetrator, so being on the right. You have the option of being a savior, so being an ally, and
Like
you have
an
the
apologist,
option,
maybe.
an ally, whatever,
Yeah.
like an apologist. And I'm not talking about real allies that are actually doing fucking useful things, right? That's not. There is a very healthy.
You're moving into like stereotype or archetypal.
and then you can become a victim, and so you can become like genderqueer. You can,
Yeah.
because as soon as you become genderqueer, you're suddenly a victim again, or you identify with some trauma you've had and you make it your identity, and then you suddenly become a victim, and it's like then you get to play out this arc.
Mm-hmm. That's interesting. It's like an interesting, I feel like that's like a bit of a narrative, like, yeah, that like kind of works in the left narrative.
Oh, the
where
right
you have
are doing the exact same thing though.
Yeah, and then the right starts to embody that narrative. You're like, yeah, well, you know, like I think a lot of they do is people the colonizers have been doing all these bad things to these people, and like you're that person, so therefore you do the bad things, and they just keep saying it over and over again, and then people start to believe it, and so you either go, actually, I am intersectional, like I am, queer or trans or whatever, or you go the other way and you go, yeah, like you guys deserve it because of, and then they just say the same story. It's just they're now the perpetrators, and then everybody gets to play together.
I feel like so
this is like a societal narrative that I'm not into.
I've already said I'm in the helper corner, right? I'm in the coach helper, like I have to save it.
Right, and you got these like messianic, like, oh, I need to change the world because of this, like give me the power so that I can
wait. But what I was gonna say is that I'm kind of like inoculated against the left-right politics system because I'm too busy like in this other corner trying to like save the victims from the rescuers, which is like, I'm not saying it's healthy, but I'm like,
right,
I can like see it and I'm like, oh no.
Yeah, you're a meta rescuer.
But it's not good. It's not good to be in that position either. But at least I'm like, thank God I'm not a victim or a persecutor.
Right. I'm a meta rescuer.
I think in order,
I save people from the rescuers.
I think in the sequence, I'm a rescuer, then a victim, then a persecutor. That's like my sequence. Like I'll be the persecutor last of all.
Tell us in the chat what you are, what your unhealthy, unhealthy version of you identifies with.
We got a viewer.
Nice.
But maybe we should link this back to the Judaism where we started.
Yeah. So I think like that you're talking about, and you're creating like I guess you're creating a narrative around the narratives that are going on in our society. And like these are examples of bad narratives, right? Like not yours, but the things you're saying. They're
getting stuck in any corner of the triangle seems like a bad narrative to
me. Like you don't want to have this narrative of, oh, the people that look like this are evil people, right? Like that's a really bad thing to construct our society around. And
I mean, even the existence of evil is quite an uncomfortable thing to, like, if you're talking about uncomfortable pills to swallow, are there evil people in the world? Even just saying yes or no on that puts you in more of the victim,
right?
Or like
when
it puts you in a bucket.
It puts you in a bucket, but it also like it winds up being the fodder for stories, right? So as soon as you're like, there are evil people in the world, like some of those evil people are around, right? And some of those evil people get into groups, and some of the out groups that you don't know a lot about might look like that based off of the way you construct your reality and the way you guys live your lives. So it's like constructing like good narratives that people can wrap their heads around, and or not even fully, I guess. I don't know.
What is it? The People's Liberation Front of Judea.
The People's Liberation Front of Judaism?
Monty Python and The Life of Brian. There were two branches. One was the liberation, the Judean People's Liberation Front, and the other one was the People's Front of Judea. Liberation Front.
Right.
And they
or South Park's.
They hated each other.
Yeah, South Park, the future, everyone becomes atheists, and then they fight over what the best name is.
I mean, I see, like, to loop back into the Bible stories being about human nature. I see this as like a deeply human nature thing. There's just, this is what we do. We form factions and then we fight about it.
Right.
And, you know, I'm just waiting for the moment where someone else goes like, no, we don't. Like,
Right. And like that's what I'm thinking. Like as you said that, like I'm like, oh well, like this is the narrative, but like this narrative is true, but it's or I guess like the fact is true, but there's like a difference between narratives and facts, I think. I'm still struggling to understand what a narrative is. I feel like I did, like when I was doing a lot of the meditation, it was okay, like silence the voice, like don't worry about it, like it's not that important, just let it go. And you know, I haven't had, the voice hasn't been like a big part of my life that much.
You're taking the journey home into like, why the heck did we make the narratives in the first place?
Yeah.
Like, to be human.
And I realized the reason I'm not participating in the narrative stuff is because I hate the way people are doing it. And I hate like having to go up against a narrative like this is it's just too much. Right? If you do like the everybody's racist, like you get if you're like, well, I don't think everybody's racist, like, oh well, you have the unconscious racism and therefore you know you're doing that, like this, and that you said that means that you're not aware of your own racism, so that, and it's like therefore you're the most racist, and anytime you say anything now, I'm going to interpret that as racism.
Yeah, so
And
that's the victim. So the thing is, when you're labeled a perpetrator, you can't unlabel yourself a perpetrator, really. The victim has
right,
to label you a perpetrator. So in this sense, the victim has most of the power.
Oh, in the drama triangle, the victim has all the power because the victim creates the scenario in which they perceive a perpetrator and the victim runs off to try and find a rescuer.
right,
And then like, so the victim is the most powerful position in the triangle.
right. And people can't, you know, in a lot of places people can't, like this is very common, right? Like if you know somebody can, if there's a perceived slight against someone, or you do like a microaggression or whatever it is, like people will just, like, you're very vulnerable, like you create an extreme amount of vulnerability. And like, I don't know, when I was a kid that was fine, like we used to just like sort of make fun of each other, like poke each other in like ways, and you are being vulnerable and the people are recognizing that, and you know, usually it lands, but it doesn't always land.
Well, it
right?
still hurts. I remember like it still hurted, even like playing those jokes and mucking around. I'd reflect on it and be like, well, that sucked.
Oh,
Like as well. You ever get hurt by being, I mean, there was plenty of them that didn't.
some of it, yeah, like as a more sensitive, I'm like, oh, actually that sucks, I don't like when you do that.
Yeah.
But some of it is also like when you're kids,
Yeah.
you
Not
there's a lot
never,
more.
but like I think sometimes things didn't land and they didn't. I can't think of a time when I got hurt now, but I'm sure I did. It's just like it wasn't the norm at all. It was, the norm was
Yeah.
fun. It like there's this fun of, there's a form of play where you both play the perpetrator and then kind of,
Let's find your weakness, and so we can kind of inoculate you against your own weakness.
yeah, and then
Yeah.
strength in a group and stuff like that. And like you're playing the perpetrator in a, I mean, it's not completely harmless, right? Because you can step out of line, but that's also part of the learning of it.
Yeah, you're on your edge.
Hmm.
And the better you can stay on your edge, like the better the situation is. And like people that could do that really well were like really cool, and everybody wanted to hang out with them. But then people that went over, it's like, no, like you're a jerk, like I'm not hanging out with you.
Well, yeah, or he has bad social skills, right?
Yeah.
It's like,
But
this
there
guy
was a
can't-
thing.
No.
Sorry.
Well, this guy can't take a joke. Like you make a little
Yeah.
joke and he says something super personal and like rip it
Yeah.
out. Oh no, he's not.
Well, your mom's dead. Like, dude, what the fuck?
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh man, we used to have this joke, like it's like back in the day, it was like your mom. So whatever it is, like your mom, and then like people would go, my mom died.
Yeah.
The person would be like, oh shit. It's fine. Like, no, I'm just fucking with you. Yeah, like and there's something, the thing about that is that it created strong people, like it created people that could like handle handle these kind of situations. Because you're always on the edge, like you're more embodied, like you're better at like dealing with both sides of this, right? So you're better at dealing with when people go over and like they get out of line, you know, you can call them out because you know how everybody's going to react. Like, you know, everybody's got your back because this isn't established over the line. And when someone's under the line, like when they're not willing to like push buttons and things like that, that means that they're not really comfortable. Like they're not really part of the group yet, or they don't feel that they are. And so there is like, it's an important skill set to be able to draw that out, to be like, hey, like you're here, we're relaxed, we're all friends and we like each other. So, you know, that means that you relax and you also play this game. And, you know, maybe they don't want to play it because they don't know how, but then you teach them or this and that or whatever. You know, it's like a whole thing.
Sitting in a puzzle recently that I finally worked out I can handle it. Like I have the capacity to be in the place that is potentially uncomfortable. I can tussle with people. I can have fun in that place space. And also like starting to notice I don't want to much of the time. Like,
yeah,
I could, but like, I don't really like, I don't want that, even though I have amazing capacity. There's ways in which I'm like, I don't.
But there are ways.
That battleground.
There are, like, your learning edge has shifted.
Yeah.
So the things that you're doing that are risk, that you're like, the games you're playing are very different now because, you know, you're older and more mature.
Right.
Right. Like I do this, like the games I like, I have like a much higher capacity for, you know, dangerous things than my kid does, but I play on the kid level because that's what I'm doing. But I'm also playing on this new heightened level of like risking my kid's life. And just so I state it, I'm not doing that aside from the fact that he's alive, and whatever you do is like, there's a risk to that.
Right. You could accidentally step on him when he's walking past you, and that could like suck for him.
Right. And like I haven't stepped on him, but like I have like,
don't worry, one day
him.
he'll like run interference and step under your feet and you'll be like, where did he even come from?
Yeah. I think I might have accidentally like I bumped him before. Right. And like that's a thing. And like cars exist. Like there's all these dangers for kids, right?
Cupboard doors.
Huh?
Cupboard doors.
Yeah.
Water.
Well, the cupboard doors we most take care of, but like whatever it is, just like everything is dangerous. Like they're kids.
Heavy objects.
Like when they're born, putting them on their stomach is dangerous. You know what I mean? So you're like, whatever you're doing, like there's risks, you know, even if you're being super safe, it's then you have the over safety risk, right? That they're not going to develop. So that's just sort of part of life, right? Like, but whatever it is, like it's a different level, it's a different game, but it's very similar games still, where you're still playing with the edge and you're playing with the danger.
I want to look back to Judaism.
Yeah. How does this relate?
Well, I think the thing that comes up in my mind, which was the original thing that got us here, was around Jews being colonizers or not, right? Like there's this real victim triangle when it comes to Israel that I think people haven't resolved.
Yeah. Yeah, there's that's the thing, is like, even if you're gonna like take the colonizer route, it's like it's located to Israel. Like it's a very specific, it's non-diffuse, right? So even if you want to say they colonized Palestinians or all that stuff, like however you want to have that discussion, it's all centered around Israel. It's not centered around North America. Like Jews didn't settle and then do the slavery thing. Like they did, you know, like they were kind of the victims. But also we don't exactly see ourselves as victims. Which is the
from the inside. I always go back to this line: in every generation we will be.
Yeah, yeah, it's Pesach. It's been a year, so I got to I don't remember it exactly, but the but there's not saying we're victims. It's saying like this is how things work. Like this is how it works. We're representing God and we live godly lives, and therefore all the goyim try to kill us, and usually it's our fault because we sinned. And they came to wake us up and remind us that to be more Jewish. And
Which is
like that's not
which is insane to me, right? Because I'm seeing this literally, like when I don't know, I follow the Jewish subreddits, and when Kanye West was talking a lot, people were like, "Oh, I'm wearing my kippah more now because, you know, I need to stand up to the face of anti-Semitism." Like it actually happens where it seems like Judaism thrives when there are
on oppression. How can you build a religion on oppression? And how did we build a religion on oppression?
Right. Which I really like enjoy as a like, okay, we're not falling into this trap, but also I don't know that like building a culture around being oppressed is a great solution.
Right. It doesn't necessarily, like looking at the victim's triangle, it doesn't look like a healthy culture.
But I mean, it is a good culture.
Well, it's a good culture.
Yeah, it is actually.
This
In a lot of ways, it
it's
is.
produced a bunch of Nobel Prize winners. So I mean, in hindsight, you can say this doesn't seem like a good formula, but it has been a good formula.
Okay, except the Nobel Prize. None of the Nobel.
Time out. I caught something there, and I'm not gonna let you get away with it. I said healthy. You said good.
Healthy for who?
I didn't say healthy for who. I said I don't think it's a good culture. I said I don't think it's a healthy culture, and you went for
okay.
I think it's a good culture. Those are different things.
Okay.
Those are like, I didn't say it wasn't a good culture. I said it wasn't healthy to build a culture on victimhood.
Okay, I mean, if you're producing Nobel Prize winners, though, they're not the most unhealthy culture there is, right? Like you have to have a certain amount of health to raise a child well. And
yeah, she's using it as a metric, not as like a goal.
I think there's a correlation between healthy and good.
And there should be. You should expect there to be.
Yes.
But I see these as like different.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah, so I think Elliot's right. But the other thing I like that there is a difference between the healthy and the good, and like there definitely is good in Judaism, and like for me the struggle is like figuring it out, like what is the good parts and what is the not good parts. But also just to point out for the so it's very hard, and like so you use this as a metric of the Nobel Prize winners, and the thing is like I don't think it's Orthodox people winning the Nobel Prizes.
Yeah, but it's the culture, like Orthodox people kept the culture together for a very long time and did all the natural selection. And then people from the offshoots maybe went and did the Nobel Prizes, but they wouldn't have been there if it wasn't for the Orthodox people.
Right. So that's the Orthodox story. This is the weird thing. This is the thing that trips me up. This is the Orthodox story, and it definitely like feels true, at least at first glance.
It also would feel true from the inside.
Yeah, and it definitely would feel true from the inside. I'm not saying it's true, but I'm saying it's definitely a reasonable hypothesis. The thing is that God promised the Jews that they would never be wiped out. So it's not the Orthodoxy that's doing it, it's God that's doing it. And the Orthodoxy needs to stop taking credit for God's work.
Oh, that's a spicy, I like it. I like the hot take.
Yeah.
I like it a lot. That's great.
I'm like, this is one aspect I love about the internet, is that the hottest takes rise to the surface, and then like the hot takes like float around in the collective consciousness until they bump into each other, and then we see which one wins. And I like I had this one, I was seeing a lot of environmental stuff. Do you remember plastic straws? This is drama. Plastic straws.
We don't have plastic straws in Canada. They got banned.
Right. Why did they get banned?
Because insane people.
Because a picture of a turtle happened, right?
Yeah.
Plastic straws get caught up turtles' noses and turtles eat them, and then horrible, horrible, horrible things. But do you remember when the plastic straws happened?
Well, the ban was recently, but like the whole drama stuff, no.
Yeah, when did that happen? When did that ban happen? because I remember exactly when it happened.
Oh, the plastics, so in
Plastic
Canada,
straws.
it happened in January.
This year.
Which, if you're reading, if
No,
you're listening to this, it's about
No,
3
when the
months.
controversy, the start of that, like
I'm gonna say 2018.
people bitching about plastic straws. Do you remember when it happened?
No.
So I remember it as the last thing to happen before COVID.
Oh.
Like, oh no, we're destroying the environment with all these plastic straws. Like it was there. It was like middle of the year before COVID to like the end of the year before COVID. And then COVID happened. And I was like, oh, this is like really interesting. What we're gonna see is this environmentalist wave who like cares about the environment, cares about non-plastic straws, crashing into the like disposable masks wave, right? Because we have to wear a disposable mask because of COVID. And at the time I was like embedded in Australian culture thinking like, I actually can't tell which one's going to win. And in retrospect, disposable masks, human health is more important than the environment. But, you know, there was still a push to like homemade masks made out of reusable materials.
Yeah, the cloth
like all of that, the cloth masks. But actually, like single-use disposable plastics won out over environmental care. Like no one's going to the hospitals and saying, we need to stop using single-use disposable plastics because they're sterile. We need to like sterilize on our own. No one's saying that. And which I find really interesting because at the time I wasn't sure which way it was going to go. These two major zeitgeists, the environmentalists.
These two narratives are like clashing. Yeah.
Right. But human health won out in that case. But
this is your interpretation of why one narrative won over the other. I think
I don't really
something different.
I don't really know, but it does seem like we continued the single-use plastic masks, and environmentalism went like, you know, we're still here. Masks are getting wrapped around bird food.
Right now, we're going to ban single-use plastics in Canada, so that happened 3 months ago.
Right, we did the one.
So there's no like plastic bag. Like I know there are plastic bags at grocery stores, but they're like getting rid of them.
Yeah,
and whatever, we can do the effective altruism where like, actually the calculus is that the paper bags are worse than the single-use plastics that people often use anyway. But anyway, the narrative
by the melting pot and the zeitgeist and the narratives that fight each other and meet in the middle. Anyway, so Orthodoxy shouldn't take credit for God's work. That's a good one.
Yeah. And so for me, it's the thing is like, this is like, it's you know, it could be interpreted as like a quib as like a line, like a witty line to like Orthodoxy or something, but it you know, which it is, but also it feels true to me for some reason. And like this just could be because like I grew up in the religion. I'm like, oh, it's impossible for the Jews to be wiped out completely, and like I just don't have any real perspective on that. And also historically, like they've been trying to kill a million times. Like at a certain point, we're going to figure out that you can't really get rid of them. Get rid of us, I guess. And so there's something like you can let go of the Orthodoxy and still be Jewish and not worry about it too much. And like I think that's kind of a sweet spot in a way. But also,
sin too much and they will persecute you.
Right. So, but that's the thing is that, like the Holocaust happened, the Jews were in the ghettos and they were doing like the Orthodox, like the more modern day Orthodoxy, which by that, I mean, like the stuff that happened since, I guess, Moses meddled since, so like 300 years ago versus like the stuff that happened before that. Which would have looked different. And so like that's the thing is like depending on how you're taking this, and I don't want to say like it's hard to talk like the Holocaust and then say, well, it's because of this or whatever. Like I don't want to do that. That's stepping into a whole bunch of stuff. But yeah, like there is a discussion around this that I'm not prepared to have.
There's another thread that I want to weave in here, which is the kind of the Orthodox structure sort of came into, I think they worked very hard. I think they built from Orthodox grew Chabad, and Chabad popularized and spread more Judaism. But what they did is they spread a very specific branch of Judaism, and they spread their style of interpretation and their culture of Judaism, and they spread it all over the world. And what I see is every different congregation that I go to practices slightly differently, like holds themselves slightly differently. And then this big stamp of Orthodoxy trying to, like, I'd say whitewash, but like just wipe over everything else and say the Judaism is Orthodoxy, there's no other branch. Or
Yeah, this is the right way.
Right, which is like, I receive this experience in quite a complicated way, because on the one hand, I see every congregation being slightly different. And on the other hand, I was raised in this dominant culture, the right way, this is the right way as the culture. And yet, you know, that's not quite like, you know, my family has Friday night dinner every Friday. And there's like tiny things like, how do you hold the wine cup? Or like, I knew someone who, when they lit like candles part of the meal, they would like put them out again like half an hour later or something like that. Like it was a weird OCD type thing that the person, but you know, that was like what this person did as part of the way that they lived their culture. And from the outside, I always felt strange about that. And there's other things like, how do you cut the bread? Do you tear the bread or cut the bread? Do you like stand when people cut the bread, or do you sit when people cut the bread? Does everyone say the blessing together, or does the leader of the table say the blessing and everyone stays silent? Like these little things start adding up to personal culture and personal participatory experience. This is like,
Right.
like this isn't even congregations. This is at the family dinner table, that we're practicing slightly differently at the family dinner table. Like,
Right.
the problem here that there's like a pluralism going on that is rapidly being like washed over.
So that's not exactly okay. I'm just gonna like defend the Orthodoxy and the
sure.
Lubavitch a little bit now. That's not exactly what's going on, because there are different levels to this. So there are things that are like, these are mitzvahs. You know, we have derisas, which are like, these are the things that God said. We have derabbanans, which are, these are the things that the rabbi said. And then we have what's called minhagim, which are customs. And then there's different levels to that, like the minhag b'Yisrael halachahi. So there's customs that the whole Jewish nation has, and then there's customs that each individual sect has. And so on that bottom level, like the variation is usually fine. So like some people, when they wash their hands, they'll wash 2 times, and some people they wash 3 times, some people wash 4 times, or 2 times, 3 times. I don't remember. I know I washed 3 times for everything, which is like nobody's custom, because it's like a mishmash. Like, because my parents didn't grow up Orthodox, so they took a little bit from Chabad and they took a little bit from here. So it's like this new hybrid thing.
I'm laughing because I think that the true way is the way that you described it. Everyone's a mishmash.
Right. So the mishmash thing, I like. So I mean, I'm a mishmash, but a lot of people have their have their specific customs. So they have their like, this is how they do it, and these guys, this is how they do it. But they'll eat at each other's house. If somebody's not doing kosher, even if they're Jewish, even if they're doing kosher style, like Orthodox won't eat at their house. So there is that difference. And even like the prayers are pretty much the same, but there are some like slight variations. But they're pretty much the same. And the Torah itself, like the Torah itself is the same across everywhere. I think one of them might have like a different letter. But like
the African tribe had a couple
the
different letters,
Yemenites.
and the whole Torah was the same except for a couple letters.
Yeah, this is what I heard, that the Yemenites had it. There was a couple different letters that were different, but the meaning was the same, and the way you pronounced it, I think, was the same. And if you ever been to, Yemenites are a great example. I love them. Taimani, they call it in Hebrew. I had this friend when I was in Israel who was Yemenite. It was awesome. And they got like crazy stuff going on. So the way they read, I used to go to their synagogue, because like I love the way they read it, because it's so different than the way the Ashkenazim read it. So Ashkenazim are very like, now when I hear it, it's very like, it's like talking Hebrew with an American accent is so annoying. It's like so
You've
obnoxious.
got to listen to some Australian way, because obviously we have our own way to pronounce a Hebrew accent, ancient Hebrew
Oh man,
accent for an Australian.
that stuff is so obnoxious. And so like if you imagine on a spectrum of like like Ashkenazim speaking Hebrew, and then Israeli speaking Hebrew, and then you have Yemenites speaking Hebrew, where they're just like, it's like all this guttural like het and hey, and like there's like, and like they pronounce, there's a couple different letters that the Ashkenazim pronounce exactly the same, and Israelis will also pronounce the same, and they actually differentiate like letters or letters with the dots in them, and so it's so cool. It's like a crazy new culture. I don't know why I'm saying this. Oh yeah, but the things are the same. It's just like there's these variations that are aesthetically very different, but it's like the same prayers and the same words. They're just speaking with a different accent. And yeah, like people will be able to pray in each other's synagogues, and that counts.
Yeah, like equally, I don't see myself walking to a church to pray. That would feel weird and uncomfortable, but I would happily
Right.
walk to any synagogue in the world.
Right. So Orthodox won't go into Reform synagogues. So like when I was religious,
I would feel a little weird about them, but
yeah,
I
and not even
I have-
to pray, just like go into the prayer section. Like you weren't allowed to do that.
Oh,
Yeah.
really?
I can imagine that like this is one of those near truths are your enemy.
No, because
Right.
it's no, I don't know if I should say this online, but it's classified the same as like a church. So like Orthodox people can't go into the praying area of a church. So you go into the building, and we did that once. I was at camp counselor on a canoe trip, and then it started raining, and so we had to like get off the water, and there was a church nearby, so we went into the church. So it's like I don't know, like 30 Jews inside the church taking refuge.
Don't go into the prayer section. Get out of there.
Yeah, so yeah, they were like, okay, like you can go into like they have like a dining room or whatever, like they had like a bunch of rooms there, and like the general area, but you can't go into the prayer place because it's called a Avodah Zorah. It's a house of idol worship. And that narrative, the thing is, like, if you're going to keep the Jewish narrative, like that's like the central Jewish narrative, is that you don't worship idols. Right? Like there's three big things you don't do. It's you don't worship idols, you don't murder people, and you don't commit adultery. And that's the narrative. And they've got the meta protocol for the narrative of which levels are which. And I'm still not really closer to
No, the Judaism is the conversation, is the argument. Remember?
Oh,
Five opinions. We said this earlier.
Oh, so we've been doing
the Judaism
for a while already.
Right.
Okay, now tie it into metamodernism.
This is the Judaism?
No, tie into metamodernism. So this is like the meta protocol of this stuff. How do we even create the metamodernism, or are we saying, hey, actually metamodernism is like a Christian thing, or like a, let's say like a Greco-Roman from the Axial Revolution, and this just isn't our problem. Like this is your guys' problem. You wiped out the temple, and now you got to live in that. Psychotechnologies live.